Hello, listeners. There are some clerical errors in today's Retro Encounter episode, all for scheduling reasons. The episode recorded in late February, but eventually got pushed back a few weeks. As such, in the episode I say it's 180, but really it's episode 182, and next week we're posting our first East the Oath and Felghana episode, and not a Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals episode. And also, later this month is an episode on mini-consoles, and not a Kingdom Hearts 3 spoiler cast. Most of those happened already. Sorry for the confusion. Here is episode 182 of Retro Encounter. Hello and welcome to episode 180 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly Podcast. I'm Mike Sollosi, and today, joining me on a little bit of job hunting, we have Peter Triezenberg.
Hi, Peter Triezenberg, resident catmancer.
Nice.
Meow.
Okay, and joining the Catmancer and I is Greg Delmage.
Hi, my name is Greg Delmage. I will be the Daddiator. It's my class.
OC, do not steal. I think we stunned Mike into silence.
Would you prefer Dad bury him? I don't know.
No, I think I'm just going to cut out every line of Greg's dialogue and for the whole podcast.
Wow, after all that trouble.
Joining Greg, Peter, and I is Audra Bowling.
Oh, hi.
Audra,
Resident freelancer, I guess.
Right on. Audra, this is your first podcast with RPG Fans, so let me say welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Now, job systems, class systems, however you exactly want to identify them, crown systems in one game on our Google Doc here. Basically, every RPG has some way of managing stats and skills, and sometimes they layer that with a job system. Assigning characters specific titles or jobs or classes to affect their stats and skills and role in gameplay. Now, every listener that we have here has probably played at least one game with a job system on it, so I don't want to go over long into explaining what those are. But in general, the first job system in a game like this took place in the very first RPG of all, in Dungeons & Dragons, where you would choose, I think it was fighter, cleric, mage, thief, at the very beginning of a session, and that would affect what skills you learned and spells you learned, and what stat gains you had. And in the very first RPGs, which were based on Dungeons & Dragons, like Ultima and Wizardry, you would do the same thing. You would choose a race and class at the beginning of the game, and that affected your stat gains and some of the things you could learn. And several years after Ultima and Wizardry, the very first Japanese RPGs, Dragon Quest and then Final Fantasy, which came after Dragon Quest II, each of those had a lot of influence from Ultima and Wizardry and basically created the earliest tropes of Japanese RPGs from the inception, and both of those series ended up playing around with job systems a lot over their lifetimes. Gentlemen and lady, I think all of us have played at least several Final Fantasy games. Where I'm not going to try and gatekeep you with, well, what do you think of their second album? Kind of conversations here. But
it sucks. Nobody likes that one.
you say that, but Kawazu Defenders are out there, man.
I know. I've met a couple of them. They're very nice people.
But oversimplifying a little bit, Final Fantasies 1, 3, 5, 10, 2, 11, 12, Zodiac Age, and 14, maybe also 13, but I don't really understand the class system in 13. All of those have some variety, some variant of a JRPG class system. In Final Fantasy 1, you chose a party of 4 characters between 6 classes and played the entire game with those same 4 characters. But you could upgrade classes around the midpoint of the game. But several years later, or just a few years later, Final Fantasy III, you have 4 main characters that all start out as the Onion Kid class, and then you can change their classes in menus between battles that allowed for party customization beyond the very first choice of the game. So, Audra, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Is there a Final Fantasy class system that is maybe your favorite, or is a particularly interesting one to you?
Well, actually, I quite like the 10-2 variation on it with the dress spheres and garment grid.
Yes.
I thought it was an interesting way to implement job system, especially since you could change them in battle.
Oh, so they do change in battle. So it's a little bit like 13 that you can.
Yeah.
Which makes sense considering they have the same director.
Oh, okay.
Motomu Toriyama. He got his start at Square working on mini games for like FF7 and stuff. But his directorial debut was 10-2. And I think it kind of leaves a mark on the series that he would kind of go on to elaborate on with 13 and its sequels.
Right on. And
Definitely.
one other thing about job systems, at least in Japanese RPGs especially, is that I think they add a layer of visual interest. For a lot of them, that'll change your character's appearance. And 10-2 really goes full bore into that because you're playing dress up with these 3 main characters, and the dress spheres can get pretty. I'm not that familiar with 10-2. I only played the very beginning of it, but the different costume changes can get pretty elaborate, right?
Yeah, they can get pretty elaborate and pretty silly, even with like the mascot ones.
And one thing, again, I don't. Maybe I'm misremembering part of the 10-2 battles, part of the 10-2 battle system and job system, I guess. But in most Final Fantasy games, jobs are like something you change in a menu. They're almost like an equipable item. Like you take your job system on and off, your job on and off, and tweak it around and customize it a little bit. But it's not really connected to equipment and weapons. Like like a dancer and a knight can equip the same knife or short sword. But in 10-2, like the dress sphere system replaces a lot of equipment. Is that right?
Yeah, you only actually have accessories that you can equip to characters. Everything else is automatically with the dress sphere. So if you picked warrior, you'd automatically have a sword and stats for warrior.
So you don't get to collect swords or keyblades in this game. I don't know if I'm into this spirit.
That takes out one of the main appeals of the game, probably.
That was about 70% of why I powered through to the end of Kingdom Hearts 1, was because I wanted to collect the last couple keyblades.
Yeah, well, I mean, in Kingdom Hearts 3, the keyblades transform, so maybe that's a class system? I don't know. Because one of them turns into a shield, and another one turns into a gun.
I'm calling it right now. We are not having a Kingdom Hearts section in this podcast. Just just throwing that out there. Staying in Final Fantasy land right now. I remember liking the menus in 10-2 and thinking the dress sphere system was interesting. Do you think it loses anything by replacing the equipment system, or is it, do you basically just get a trickle of new dresses through the whole game, or are there quests to unlock more? How does the job system in 10-2, how do the dress spheres in 10-2 work throughout the whole game?
You actually gain more as you progress through the story, and I think there's extra ones that you can find. I don't remember exactly how that works.
But it's not totally married to the plot like most of them in Final Fantasy V?
No, it's not really. You don't stumble upon a crystal and gain more abilities.
Right. And I guess backtracking a little bit, in Final Fantasy 3 and 5, both of them, you basically get several jobs or classes throughout the game. And in 5, it's every time you get to a new plot event that's related to one of the crystals, you get between like 4 and 6 new jobs, and that's a lot of the skill progression and visual interest of the game. Because the main characters of 5, each have a distinct look when you change class. Unlike 3, the Onion Kids are, I think, each a different color, but at least in the NES version of FF3, the classes all look identical
Yeah.
when you change into them. But in 5, it's like, Galoof as a knight versus Lena as a knight versus Butts as a knight. They're, it's clearly those 3 characters dressed up in similar armor, and the visual interest of changing costumes is a lot of the fun of it. Which brings me to the recent FF12 remake. Peter, you were on that episode where we discussed that a lot. That class system is a little. It's almost like halfway between the old D&D way and the Final Fantasy way, because you do choose a class at the beginning, but then you can subclass and multiclass later.
Yeah, in the vanilla release, the license board was really open ended, which has kind of been a running trend in some later Final Fantasy games. But it almost gave you a little too much freedom, and you'd end up at the end of the game with 3 paladins, because that's the best way to go. Is you have a white magic using tank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heavy armor and enough healing to get around, basically.
Exactly. Now, so what they did for the international release was the Zodiac job system, which was a brilliant way of basically your character picks out their own unique license board based on one of the Zodiac signs that is tied to a specific Final Fantasy job class, and once they pick it, they're stuck with that for the whole game. So, kind of like Final Fantasy 1, where you have to go through and you're kind of stuck on the path you choose from the outset, but you do have a little bit of freedom to customize and level up within those constraints, and it sort of lets you customize your party a little more to your liking. Now, what Zodiac Age did, which is probably Zodiac Age is like one of the best re-releases like ever, because they added the ability to subclass. So now you can have like a black mage who knows how to use bows or create something crazy like that.
And well, the subclassing thing isn't new to the Zodiac job system release. It's the FF12 International Edition that was released a couple years after the original PS2. But
no, but they didn't have subclassing in that version.
Oh, they only had the starting classes and not subclasses.
They only had the starting classes in the original version. They added the dual classes for Zodiac Age.
Okay.
So like 11 and Tactics?
Kind of, yeah.
A little. Well, it's heavily inspired by Tactics. I mean, and a lot of these jobs are because they're both Evil East World games, and what's his name? You know who I mean? The guy who did Vagrant Story.
Yasumi Matsuno.
Yeah. They're both Matsuno games, and they're both Evil East games. So there is a through line there. But how does subclassing work exactly?
In Zodiac Age, you basically, after a certain point in the game, you're allowed to pick a second job board. I think you have to unlock a certain tile on your first job board to get that second class. But once you do, you're allowed to pick another Zodiac symbol that's different from the one you already chose. And from there, you can interchangeably level up between the two. You have a pooled source of JP that you, or LP, I don't even remember, whatever. It's been a while since I played Final Fantasy 12. But you have a shared pool you can spend on to get new licenses as you go through, and it really opens up how you're able to customize your character.
Cool. And well, I don't know if we have any Final Fantasy 11 players here, but I know we definitely have some people that have dabbled in FF14. Final Fantasy 14's job system is weirdly like a lot of the other Final Fantasy ones, but also kind of a lot like Dragon Quest 3 or Dragon Quest 9, because your main character levels up, has a separate level up or a separate experience bar for every single job. And if you start out as a level 1 pugilist and decide to change jobs to be a level 1 conjurer, you go back to level 1. But if you switch back to pugilist, you keep the same level you were at before. So unlike Final Fantasy V, where you have a base level and then can switch jobs willy-nilly, in Final Fantasy XIV, you are the level of your job and not the level of your character, which is interesting, but then gets better and better and more interesting the more you level up, because you can some jobs upgrade, so I should say some starting classes upgrade into more powerful jobs. Every job has a quest line and story connection that's unrelated to the main story, but yields powerful skills and armor. So when I first played Final Fantasy XIV, and I apologize if I've mentioned this in other podcasts, is I started out as a pugilist in the big desert city, but then when I tried other classes, I realized that my favorite class was probably warrior. So I switched to so when I was around a level 20 pugilist, I switched back to warrior and then grinded a little bit to start doing main jobs as a warrior instead of as a marauder instead of a pugilist. But then at level 30, when your starting job can upgrade, I leveled up pugilist some more and changed my level 30 pugilist to a level 30 monk and my level 30 marauder to a level 30 warrior. And they gave me a bunch of new shiny armor and a new region to explore. And I basically for the first 50 levels of Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, you can do a class quest every 5 levels. So
wow.
they have, I think, something like, oh shoot, I want to say 9 or 10 starting classes in just Realm Reborn, and then each expansion added 2 or 3 others. So as you play through Final Fantasy XIV's story, and is an enormous, interesting game world and game story, you're also like exploring the different ancient orders of warriors and monks and black mages and what have you, as you choose a job or multiple jobs or all the jobs and level them up. And there is some level of inner job connectivity. Like there was something called cross classing, where there was where you could learn the jobs. Learn skills you had learned in other jobs as you were leveling up your main job. There was one black mage skill that every other mage every other mage job really needs. One that reduces your casting time. So so sometimes cross-classing and cross-class skills get a little bit are a little limited, but still the FF14 job system, especially since they tie it to story and they give you an enormous amount of freedom, is really, really awesome. And I haven't played Final Fantasy XIV in over a year, but I think about going back to that game like practically monthly just because I want to try out some of the jobs I never really got to, like Dark Knight and Machinist. Okay, that was a lot of Final Fantasy we just talked about for about 20 minutes. But Peter, one thing you went back to, what you mentioned a little while ago, was that in Final Fantasy 12, a lot of the in the old license board system, sort of everyone had the same skill set, and then but it was generally an improvement when they went on to the international version and the Zodiac job system later on, and again, there's several Final Fantasy games that we haven't mentioned that don't really have traditional job systems. Like in Final Fantasy IV, basically everyone in that game is a job from Final Fantasy III.
Right.
and in Final Fantasy VI, the characters don't really have jobs, but they have a shared skill system and then a unique skill system, which may or may not tie back to an old Final Fantasy III or V job. But in 7 and 8, the characters are unique, but their skills are basically shared and can be manipulated. And
yeah, you get freedom that way with.
Basically total freedom and where a job system might be limiting to whatever job that they're in at the time. And 9 is like 4, where every character in that game feels like a job from Final Fantasy V.
Right.
But what do we like more? Do we want the total freedom, but also sort of homogeneity of the 7, 8, old 12, or do we like the costume changes, the skill exchanges, and different visuals, but also more confined nature of 5.10.2 Zodiac Age?
I do really love the job. I love job systems because I like tinkering with abilities and kind of like figuring out like builds for those. I think that's a lot of fun. I think that's part of the appeal of those systems for me. And coming up with just bizarre party compositions is really fun, and figuring out how each class can complement the strengths and weaknesses of the team. All those things are big draws to that for me. And the Bravely games, we mentioned them a little bit like offhand earlier with our Camp Banter joke. Those games do a really good job of that, as does Four Heroes of Light, which is kind of it's kind of Bravely Zero.
Yeah, well, it is. It's some of the same design team. The the merchant character in the Bravely games was also in Four Heroes of Light.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bravely games don't have Final Fantasy in the title, but you do use Phoenix Downs and White Mages and Black Mages. So it's the Bravely duo is Final Fantasy almost in all but name. So Audra, Final Fantasy games with job systems versus Final Fantasy games without. What is there a preference you have, or strengths and weaknesses that are worth discussing?
Well, I do love the strategy behind and customization behind job systems in general, and coming up with really neat parties just with makeup of that. But I kind of do like my first Final Fantasy game was Final Fantasy VII, and I really enjoyed using the materia. So I don't know. I think there's merits to both.
Yeah. The materia system and the GF draw system in 8. I don't know. You still had the visual interest of characters looking very different, but by the late game, I felt like my characters were too much the same. But it's still like getting a new GF or getting a new materia and exploring its powers is really cool and interesting. Like getting a new materia is better, maybe better than getting a cool new weapon or armor in Final Fantasy VII. And we know the rush of finding a treasure chest in an RPG, all three of us.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Personally, I always want my characters to feel unique, and if I customize if I customize them myself with a job system, then I'll have weird feelings like getting really attached to my generics in Final Fantasy Tactics. But then again, even if characters can change costumes, is that really a level of uniqueness that's better than having a fully realized character like the cast of FF7 or FF8? Greg, are you back with us?
I am.
Okay. Are you going to stay with us this time?
Yeah, I completely rebooted my network, so hopefully that does it now.
Okay, you are coming in loud and clear, and that's good. So, I mean, that's a lot of talk about Final Fantasy job systems. I'm worried that we've been focusing on Square too much on the podcast already, and here we are, 20 minutes into Final Fantasy alone. But
They did a lot.
yeah, they're an influential group, those Square Enixians. But do any of us have a favorite individual job from any Final Fantasy game? Not an entire system, just a job. Starting with you, Greg. Do you have a favorite Final Fantasy job?
I don't know, it's a tough call because I enjoy each job I find in each of the games has brought something different, but I've always enjoyed the power of the dancer job in Final Fantasy Tactics. I just love the random benefits they give out or hindrances. And same with the Bard, I guess. They both kind of fall in that, just blanketing everybody with random powers, and I just have always enjoyed that aspect of that job.
Among the most sexist jobs in Final Fantasy history.
Right? I don't see why in Tactics, you couldn't go back and forth, because you could in 5, but not in that one for some reason.
But I mean, it's a fact of life. It's a fact of life. Men cannot dance and women cannot sing. I mean, Final Fantasy Tactics taught me this.
But yeah, I've enjoyed them as far as what the classes functionally do. Beyond their sexist appeal, I enjoy them a lot.
Peter, do you have a favorite Final Fantasy job?
That is a tough one. I probably would have to go with Dark Knight. In general, I love for one thing. I Final Fantasy IV. The whole Cecil beginning the game as a Dark Knight and going through his little arc to become a paladin is one of my favorite moments in the series. But just in general, I like the give and take of the Dark Knight class, how it's like their main gimmick is they sacrifice HP to do powerful attacks. So you're kind of putting yourself into a critical state to deal damage. It's one of the most powerful classes in 10-2, going back to a game we talked about earlier. That's one of the optional dress spheres that's really worth hunting down.
Dark Knight is also a class in FF14. It was introduced in the Heavensward expansion. And I know for a while it was the main of our coworker Liz Moss.
It's a pretty sick design. I've seen the artwork from Heavensward, and that was around the time I was like, maybe I should play this game, but I can't afford it.
Yeah, I stopped playing right before the Heavensward content, so I never got to try Dark Knight. And my favorite job was Warrior, which is also a tanking class. So Sadly, I never got. I was really interested in trying it, but I never got to. Audra, do you have a favorite Final Fantasy class or job?
Yes, Geomancer. You
Oh,
get to
okay.
fight. You get to fight with bells, and you get free terrain spells.
The
Those are
FF5
pretty good.
Geomancer is they're all dressed in pajamas and fight with bells, which I never
It's
totally
so
got.
weird.
It's like, are they supposed to be dream mancers? Because I mean, bells would wake you up, and I don't know. But those terrain skills are really powerful, and they're nice because they use magic stats, but not MP.
Yeah,
So if you wanna throw one on a white mage, so so they can actually do some damage. The elemental or geomancer skill is really good for that. And FF5 is probably the best FF geomancer. The tactics geomancer is a disappointment.
Yeah,
yeah. I did
they're
have
still
fun
very
with them in
neat.
the DS version of 3, but
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah, they are pretty good in the three remake. But in
I don't know if I used the class in 3 when I played it.
no, I tried all the classes in 3, and I think Geomancer was pretty good there. But it's in FF Tactics. It's weird. They use their attack and magic stats combined with bad multipliers, and but
The
it's
random
not great.
status effects are helpful though,
Yeah,
but they're just so
but
inconsistent.
there are many classes that are way better at manipulating that stuff than the Geomancer.
No,
But
that's
I think
valid.
it's
yeah.
it's a really below average class in Tactics. But very useful in 5, both in its own and in throwing Geomancy on another class. Well, if I guess it's my turn, I think Dragoons are cool. In Final Fantasy IV, like Kane jumping seemed great. In Final Fantasy V, jumping is still cool, and the sort of dragon drain attack that you can learn is really effective at times. And in 14, Dragoons are cool also. The whole quest line is sort of hunting this legendary murderous dragoon while mastering the spear yourself.
Oh,
It's a
neat.
cool storyline. I only got to level 35 as a dragoon, I think, and again the level caps in that game are 50 for Realm Reborn, then 60, 70, 80 for the expansions.
And right from the get go with Kane, like they've always had a very neat design. I was drawn to them in Tactics for just how cool their armor and everything looks.
Yeah, just cool armor, dragon helmets, dramatic leaps and spear dives.
Right?
I was very attracted to that from the beginning, and I don't know if I like damage classes more than tank classes in 14. I would have gone harder into Lancer and Dragoon, but
Hmm.
there we are. Final Fantasy has a lot of different interests in their job systems, and we didn't really mention these in the strategy RPG Final Fantasy games. Um, they also include race as well as class, and some classes are restricted to races, and that allows another layer of of customization, like with your what is it? Was Viera, Banga, Numo, and Moogle? Was there another one I'm forgetting?
No, I think you got them all.
Okay. Uh, the race customization in Tactics Advance and A2, and also I guess in 11 and 14. Is it? I don't know much about A2. Do they limit certain jobs to certain races in that one too?
I don't know, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because I mean to completely jump series for a second. In the early days of World of Warcraft, there was a lot of limited jobs. Like I think only Horde could be shamans, and only Alliance could be paladins, and only one class could be, oh shoot, I don't remember. Like it was extremely limited what classes could be what jobs. But they moved further and further away from that with every expansion. They added more jobs and made them more available to more races with every game. And now I think you can even have a Tauren rogue. Where for decades, like Tauren was the only class that couldn't be a rogue.
I don't know. I've always liked that personally.
Do you think the limitation is a benefit and not not a negative?
I don't know. It's tough because I appreciate player customization, having players be able to do whatever they want, however they want. Like, I mean, 14 lets everybody be everything. And on the last episode of Random, we briefly touched on the fact that like the races don't really have any difference stat wise. So if it's not going to be a big difference stat wise, then it's kind of neat to make the classes matter or the races matter in another way. So I like that aspect of just making it a conscious choice as opposed to just cosmetics.
Yeah,
That makes
I
sense.
don't know. It's like having race benefits. Like I know that in World of Warcraft, for example, the trolls have extra regeneration,
Mm.
and dwarves have a little bit of extra magic resistance. Like things like that. Like that's neat, but that also gets people a little bit too married to a meta. Like what do
I
you mean?
suppose.
Yeah, like what do you mean you're you're a troll shaman? That sucks. You should be an orc shaman. We're not gonna let the troll shaman in our guild. Kind of nonsense. I don't know if that's good or bad. I just was made up.
Yeah.
That was a made up example.
But I
I
see what
mean,
you're saying there from the meta point of view. If people start
Like
gatekeeping on that, that is rough.
when you're playing a single player game and designing a team, making it so that the team is more diverse and you have to make more choices and limitations force you to make choices. I think that's good. But then if you come to the bridge of, but I want to be I don't know, I'm gonna make something up. I want to be an orc paladin. What do you mean I can't be an orc paladin? I mean that sucks because that's a choice that you want to make and that the game's preventing you from making.
It's true, although it
Yeah.
could be neat to have some sort of like far flung, like I don't know, race quest or something like that where they have to unlock it in a specific way. Could be neat, but
yeah. Or it's also can boil down to like how the developers balance those classes too, because like I think meta, like, yeah, gatekeeping sucks, but meta players also try to find, like, people try to mid max characters,
yeah,
which a lot of time, yeah.
they've been doing that since D&D days.
What were you saying, Audra?
Oh, well, actually, I think, especially for single player, it really can be interesting either way. When you think about how much customization and thought you have to put into the different races and different jobs. On the same time, you kind of want to do what you want to do.
Yeah, right. It's fun.
Yeah,
It's fun that way.
yeah. There's strengths and weaknesses to it, but I don't know. When I played Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, which is a game I have a lot of gripes with, I didn't like being things being limited to certain races or classes. I wanted my team a certain way, and a few times they would let me make that team a certain way, and I found that irritating. So something that allows more freedom, like Final Fantasy 14 or Final Fantasy Tactics, which has really no limitations other than a few gendered items and classes. Uh, I I generally like that more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. It's, I mean, each game brings its own different thing to it, and yeah, you either will like it or you don't.
We alluded to these before, but Square does have three handheld RPGs that really explore the job system in some interesting ways. Final Fantasy IV Heroes of Light, Bravely Default, and Bravely Second, which were all made by Silicon Studio for the DS, then 3DS, then 3DS again. Peter, I know you've played Bravely Default. One thing that Bravely Default and Bravely Second do really well is sort of class experimentation. Do you have a favorite combination or something from those games?
It's been a while since I played the first games. I'm trying to look back, but I loved the just some of the bizarre classes from Bravely Second. Like we already alluded to Cat Dancer. I love the pastry chef class. Like that
Hmm.
was just I'm gonna make a whole party of pastry chefs, and you cannot stop me, game.
Those pastry skills get super good in Bravely Second because they're the best way to lower enemy elemental resistances and defenses. And oh boy, you can set up some sick combos starting with a pastry chef or maybe it's patissier skill.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the localized name or whatever. But yeah, I think in original Bravely Default, I know I had at least one Dark Knight in my party because that's my go-to. I think I made Tiz a Dark Knight. Um, Black Mage, a Black Mage, a White Mage, which is usually my regular party comp, and I cannot remember who my fourth slot was. But I like to have a wild card, so I probably did something bizarre with it. I don't. It's just been a while.
My, my
Also, I also really like the crown system in Four Heroes of Light. How you had to like basically your job is the hat you put on changes your job, and then you level it up with little gemstones you find. That was a fun, cute system.
Yeah, that was a good way of putting them on it. Was it were they hats or crowns or maybe just like was there just a king class that had a crown?
I mean, they called them crown. They called it. I mean, they called them crowns, but
Right.
let's be
Yeah,
real. Some of
Yeah,
those were
yeah.
stretching the definition a
They
bit.
were they were hats. That's fair.
they were. Yeah, they could have just called them hats. And that was kind of I found after doing Bravely Default and then going back to Four Heroes of Light. As much as I enjoyed having different classes to dive into, the fact that you can't mix them, I found very disappointing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a little simpler.
Bravely
sure.
Default does a better version of it, where you have your base class and all the skills and abilities of the base class, and then you get, I think it's something like 5 or 6 points, and then and skills that you learn in other
Yeah.
classes have different point values. So you can spend your points on skills that you learned in other classes for the class that you currently have equipped. It's a a little bit like the Final Fantasy Tactics system of secondary reaction, support, movement, but in a way that I felt had you making interesting choices. My favorite Bravely Default setup is so boring. The Final Night skill lets you do a super attack that's based on your defense and not your attack stat. So I would just load up a knight with as many defensive bonuses as I could and have him equip 2 shields uh,
Right.
instead of 2 weapons, and then just spam that attack and have my other 3 characters boosting him or weakening enemies or generating more brave points, so I could use that skill more often. It was a
I,
it was a strange way of doing it, but I just loved the idea of 2 unkillable knights, like just charging forward with only shields, and then 2 mages or pop or oh shoot, what was the pop idol class in that one called?
I forget actually.
Performer. That's what it was called. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's
was called
right.
the performer class, and your character dressed up as a pop idol, and your songs could create all kinds of would basically inspire the rest of the party
Oh,
with bonuses.
you said Pop Idol. For some reason,
Yes.
I heard Pop Eye, and I'm like,
No. No.
Popeye the Sailor Man. That is
I'm
entirely
strong to
me.
the finish because I eats me spinach. But no, you do not do that in any Final Fantasy game, to my knowledge. Even though there are some very dashing pirate characters.
Yeah.
I'm of course talking about Ferris and no one else. Um,
But that was the nice thing about being able to mix both in tactics and in Bravely Default and everything is, yeah, mixing the different skills to find ways, I guess, to kind of break the system in some ways. Like I had Young Yez as a monk, and whenever she killed someone, she regained her BP from, I think, the Red Mage subset. So like I would just have her basically spamming out all her BP and then murdering everything and recharging it all, and just basically doing that every turn, and it was disgusting.
Yeah, the red mage has a lot of weird tricks in Bravely Default. I know the most efficient way to get a ton of BP is to have someone with some red mage skills poison themselves. In which case, instead of losing a BP every turn, I think they'll gain 2 if they
Oh,
if you can
that's
set it
gross,
up
but hilarious.
right. But so yeah, if you want to just like, there's so much weird trickery in Bravely Default and Bravely Second. We mentioned the Patissier and the Catmancer in Bravely Second. And also, Peter, low-key, the Catmancer in Bravely Second isn't like a weird mage that summons cats. They're like a badass berserker class that fights with fists and can summon cats.
And that's just my like aspiration in life. So
And I think the Catmancers dress up as maids and butlers, if I remember correctly.
like you do, Japan, like you
Right,
do.
sure. So, but there's some weird visual choices in Bravely Second, but in Bravely Second, there's also a class that's like not exactly undead, but like a heavily armored class that where you can sort of separate your spirit from your body and do a bunch of weird tricks. Um, there's oh boy. They added a like second white mage and second black mage class in Bravely Second that allows for powering up your previous spells and doing all kinds of weird tricks. Like they really want you to break the game in those and
Oh, for sure.
exploit the class system. Not quite as brutal as calculators in Final Fantasy Tactics or the entire Disgaea series, but there's a lot of crazy job trickery that I enjoyed very, very much when I played Bravely Second.
Oh heck yeah.
At the very beginning of the episode, we mentioned that the other seminal RPG series that was first inspired by Wizardry and Ultima was Dragon Quest, and about half of the Dragon Quest games really rely on a class system heavily. Dragon Quest III gives you a hero character on the outset, and then the rest of your party you hire sort of generic job characters that you name yourself and can. There's not really much customization in the original Dragon Quest III, but for changing jobs, you have them reincarnate back to level 1 at the Tower of Dharma, which was renamed All Trades Abbey in other games. And so, and I think the idea of sort of building karma with one class makes you stronger when you reincarnate through dharma. There's some kind of Buddhist analogy there that I don't fully understand. Um,
Fair.
but then in Dragon Quest 6 and 7, they make it a little bit more like, say, Final Fantasy 5, where you just assign jobs to characters, and eventually they'll learn more job skills, and then become stronger when you have them change jobs again. But there's also a weird job hierarchy in that game. Like you need to master these two jobs to unlock this third job, and whatnot. And there's multiple tiers of jobs. And in Dragon Quest Six especially, you can get really overpowered if you have someone master more than one advanced job. Because you don't customize by choosing what skills you learn from a previous job. You get all of the skills you've learned in previous jobs and learn them
Oh wow, that is
and
really,
learn them permanently.
that is very powerful.
And in 7 was like 6, where they you would learn everything from previous job systems, from previous jobs that you mastered, but they changed it for the 3DS version. So basically, there's 3 tiers of jobs, sort of like beginner, intermediate, advanced. And whenever you master a beginner job, you remember all of those skills permanently. So it's easy to have everyone learn, heal and such, and keep that on to the end. But you don't permanently learn intermediate job skills. But when you eventually get to unlock advanced ones, and again, this is just for the 3DS remake of 7, the first level or two of any advanced job in Dragon Quest 7 will have you learn a bunch of end tier skills from the intermediate jobs again.
Oh,
So
that's neat.
yeah, so it's not like when you master pirate, which is intermediate, you lose the tidal wave skill forever. I guess like tidal wave and sword dance. I think pirate gets both of those, and they're both great. But no, I think like 2 of the 3 advanced classes learn tidal wave or swords dance, so you don't lose them forever. It's a it was weird at first because I thought when I first played the 3DS remake of Dragon Quest 7, I thought I was going to make a super team of heroes that knew every single skill like I did when I played Dragon Quest 6. But no, they changed it a little bit, but also that forces you to make choices in
Right.
instead of being able to just make a super team of everything. And
It's a
again,
good balancing act.
yeah, it's a good it's a good. I think it was a smart choice. They make people customize their party instead of just grind as much as possible, so everyone learns everything and is at the most statistically advantageous class. The Dragon Quest VII 3DS remake is very very good, but don't expect it to have a class system like the PS1 version or like Dragon Quest 6.
I feel like that's doing the players a service too of I guess discouraging you to put that much time into it where you probably would have been like, all right, I'm set up to grind for the next however many hours and master everything, whereas you're like, oh, I guess I don't have to now.
Yeah, and also the remake of 7 has characters change appearance based on the job, which is
Ooh, snazzy.
which something that was not in Dragon Quest 6 or 7. It was in Dragon Quest 3. When you reincarnated, your character completely changed, and there was a different male and female sprite for each job. But in 6 and 7, the characters always looked the same, at least in the starting version. But the 3DS remake of 7 has characters basically changing costumes, like Final Fantasy 5, and I think that's cool. Even though I wished they looked maybe a little bit less silly in certain classes.
Yeah.
And also the level of visual, Ruff in that game is a little boy riding a wolf, and so having someone riding a wolf and changing classes to knight and hero, I thought was more interesting than Dragon Quest usually is for how their characters look. But then you get to Dragon Quest 9, and they do it's 9 is heavily inspired by Dragon Quest 3. Dragon Quest 3 was sort of the most popular Dragon Quest for years and years and years until 8 got huge. But 9 is heavily inspired by 3. It has, I think, something like 6 of the 8 Dragon Quest 3 jobs, and then ups another set of 6 upgraded jobs that were from 6 and 7. And but it's like Final Fantasy 14 in that whenever you change jobs, you reincarnate back to level 1, and each job has a separate leveling path. But unlike Dragon Quest 3, there is a lot more skill customization and spell customization in Dragon Quest 9. There is I think each class and also each weapon skill and each weapon has a different has different side quests attached to them that you can that can give you special items or special bonuses. A lot of them are in the Swine Dimples Academy after you beat that the Magic School story quest. But
Yeah.
Dragon Quest IX gets really deep and really weird with how its job system operates. Audra, you played Dragon Quest IX. You told me before we recorded. Was there something you particularly like about it, or maybe a favorite job you had?
Oh, I love the martial artist, combining them with some skills from the soldier or warrior class, and
Mm-hmm.
even I think some gladiator. I ended up defeating the final boss in about one hit from my martial artist, so I really have fond memories of them.
Oh wow, yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah, I think they were called Soldier and Fighter in Dragon Quest III, and then they changed it to Warrior and Martial Artist for Dragon Quest IX, just because they had more characters to work with on the on the DS screen. But yeah, those are good standard fighting classes, and you mentioned Gladiator. Gladiator, I think in Dragon Quest 6 and 7, you had to master Martial Artist and Warrior to unlock Gladiator, but in 9, it's its own separate quest and separate tree. But I think I think you're right. I think there's ways of dealing more damage with the base classes than the advanced classes, depending on your skill setup.
Yeah, it was pretty. I had fun exploring the job system in that one.
I just
Uh,
appreciate the punny names of like Trip of a Death Time that the martial artist gets, where you
there's
just get back a turn.
I mean, Dragon Quest is loaded with puns in both the
Oh
Japanese
yeah.
and English versions. Like all of the spells in the Japanese Dragon Quest are onomatopoeian words. Like I know Frizz is called Mera in Japanese, and Mera is the sound of a flame crackling. And
Uh-huh.
it's just baked into all of Dragon Quest, and the spell names can be a little bit silly in the recent Dragon Quest localizations from, say, I don't know, from 2004 onwards or so. But it's more true to what Dragon Quest is than the heal us, heal more, explode at spell names from from the NES.
Mm.
But uh, I really like the Armamentalist class in Dragon Quest IX. It's a little bit like a Final Fantasy Red Mage, since they have fancy hats and they use swords and magic. But
Yeah.
in uh, in Dragon Quest IX, you could cast elemental emblems on the whole class, like on your whole team, kind of like using a Saber spell in Secret of Mana or Second Densetsu 3, and it allowed you to exploit enemy elemental weaknesses in the basically in the most effective way. And it was a good offensive magic and attacking class that I really really liked their elemental skills. So I always had an armamentalist. 10, we should mention, is the Dragon Quest MMO. It's been ported to multiple systems by now, but never in English and never in North America or Europe. That game also has a race and class system. There's, I think, basically the humanoid class, the dwarf-like class, the fairy-like class, the ogre-like class, and the like mer-people class. But it has a job system that seems similar to 9, at least in the choices that you make. But I don't know how all of it works. Has anyone here done much research into Dragon Quest X? Because it's been ages since I've done so.
No, unfortunately. I just want to play it.
I always secretly wished it would come here, but beyond that,
If they made some offline version of it, I would happily play it. But I think it's been so long, that I'd be shocked if it ever got a Western release. But I mean, Dragon Quest has interesting class systems, and 10 was definitely an implementation of that. But we never got there. And incidentally, maybe two of my four favorite Dragon Quest games are ones that don't have class systems, but except that everyone is already basically a Dragon Quest 3 class. And Dragon Quest 4 and Dragon Quest 11, both of which are inspired by 3 heavily. Basically, every character is a class from 3, or a job from 3. I mean, am I the only person here that's played played Dragon Quest 11 to completion?
you are.
So far, actually.
Yeah, I
I'm
played
holding
up
out for
to
the Switch version.
Yeah,
I
I
really
played
want
like
to play the Switch version.
I put in 80 hours and finished the main quote unquote story, and I'm planning on getting back to the post game. But now I'm kind of waiting to see if they'll do like I'll either pick up on Switch or wait for them to do DLC for the PS4 version.
I put about 100 hours into the PS4 version and beat it, but I'll probably replay it on the Switch because it's my favorite game of the whole 2010s, at least. I
11,
really
11
really
was
like
great.
11. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was about 60 minutes of Final Fantasy job talk and 10 minutes of Dragon Quest job talk, which feels about right for the landscape of the internet in general. But I don't want this episode to be 3 hours long, so I think we're going to limit our discussion there. We might make this like the Battle Systems episode and do a part 2 or even a part 3 to talk about other job systems, because I mean we've barely talked about any Western RPGs other than the 2 minutes on World of Warcraft I had before, and I refuse to let this podcast die without me popping off on Disgaea for 6 minutes. So those will happen in future episodes, but not right now. But one last question, Peter. I know one thing you love to do is speculate on the nature of Final Fantasy 16 and wish that it was turn-based or more fantasy influenced or basically less like 15.
It is sort of my aesthetic, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, if Final Fantasy 16 had a job system, and Greg and Audra, you're getting this question in a second too. What is one class from a previous game that you absolutely want in, so that you can make your main character dress up a certain way?
Pastry chef.
Got it. All right. The pâtissier or pastry chef from Bravely Second.
Immortalize it.
Just throwing cakes at people, and now they're weak against fire somehow. Okay.
Yep.
Audra, do you have a pick for a class that you want to return in a theoretical Final Fantasy 16?
Ooh, probably actually Time Mage.
All right.
Thief?
I like their skills and their design too would be fun.
Yeah, they have like the old school conical hat, and Time Mages had all kinds of weird tricks in both Tactics and Bravely Default in Second, and Final Fantasy V. Oh yeah, shoot, I didn't even think about Time Mage. That's the first time that's come up on this episode. That's an interesting skit. Like they'll learn haste and slow at the beginning, and by the end of the game, they're going to be freezing people in place and rewinding turns, and just really making life difficult.
If they can get what's his face, Olban? No, what was Thunder God Sid's kid's name? He had that crazy like time stop
it was
spell.
Thank
you.
Yeah, it's Orin, and it's called Galaxy Stop in the original FF Tactics. I think it got renamed.
I wish we could have got that.
Well, I mean, it's
a cool spell.
It's like a stop and a slow to the entire enemy team or something. It's crazy. You only get as a guest. You only get a guest for him in 1 or 2 fights.
Yeah. If they bring that to the Time Age in the future, oh boy,
that would be awesome.
Yeah, that seems
very
like that
neat looking.
That has to be a limit break or something, because if you can just cast that every turn, then it's just game over forever.
Yeah, I agree with that. It definitely need to be like a special move for them to unlock or something. That's a once in a while
And I
thing.
think his class was Astrologer, which is probably similar to the Astrologian in FF14, which has some spells like that, but it's not quite the same as a traditional Final Fantasy Time Mage. But Greg, what's one class you want to see in something we've discussed so far in the theoretical FF16?
Yeah, I was thinking Time Mage as well, but my runner up would definitely be I'd go with Blue Mage. Just having the main be Blue Mage and have them. I mean, I like the outfit they've brought to the Blue Mages in 14, the kind of like scholarly adventure kind of look of like we're going to go out in the field and do field study kind of stuff. So I would love to have like a Blue Mage hero. It would be an interesting way to make that a thing that people do as opposed to just a random side quest. If the main character just has to be it, and that's the entire caveat of them, it would get you through all the little side stuff.
And maybe have some boss fights automatically teach you powerful Blue Mage skills, just so you wouldn't be able to completely avoid learning monster skills. But having Blue Magic as a major ongoing quest throughout the entire game, instead of just thrown onto one character like Quistis or Kimari, I think is a much better idea.
And I think it'd be neat too, like you said, with having maybe even with some of the boss ones too, like you get that ultimate move that is more of a limit break kind of situation as well.
Yeah. Right, yeah, that makes sense. Like either powerful regular skills or limit breaks coming from boss fights. You and I should just clearly design the Blue Mage for Final Fantasy 16. I mean, I'm sure they'll hire us. We have a podcast, right? That's all you need to get
Let's
hired.
call them up.
Yeah.
Let's do that right now.
Yeah, we can find their number on Google. And me personally, I'm a little bit amazed we haven't mentioned samurai or ninjas in this podcast yet, because I enjoy both of those jobs very much in Final Fantasy, but especially samurai.
They're so good and broken.
The FF Tactics samurai that has really powerful magic skills that differentiate between friend and foe and are unaffected by brave or faith, and a really powerful evasion skill that's based on your brave stat. And in FF5, samurai are just good, strong, armored guys that can also throw money for straight nines damage, because that makes sense. And in and in FF14, samurai being really stylish damage characters. I love Final Fantasy Samurai. I would love to see samurai jobs be something in FF16, but
I was saying I would like them to do more of that class as well, because Samurai is a really neat class, and Orin's probably one of the best Final Fantasy characters.
Yep. And he's definitely a Final Fantasy Samurai, but
yeah,
not from a specific game of Samurai.
Is Edge any good in I've only played the DS version of 4, and in that one Edge was borderline useless, which sucks because he was one of your permanent party members at the end. Is he better in like any other version of the game?
He's basically the same in the original Final Fantasy IV, but in the advanced remake which is also in the complete remake on PSP, and I think also on the some of the PC versions of FF4. When everyone gets their post game equipment, he becomes much better.
Okay,
maybe not quite as an offensive powerhouse as Yang, but they make him more survivable and make his skills better.
That's good.
In later versions, yeah. But he is a bit of a weak link in the party at the very end of Final Fantasy IV. Like okay attacker, but just takes way too much damage, and the ninjutsu's not nearly as good as black magic.
Exactly.
That's unfortunate. Because their whole thing is just to be super evasive, so they don't get hit very often, and then try and deal out the punishment from there.
Yeah, evasion doesn't really work great in Final Fantasy IV. I mean, there's he is your fastest party member, but that also just makes him probably just the best item user. Is what it amounts to. But
Cyan was the samurai in 6, and he was solid, but his skills just took so long to build up.
Yeah, the problem with him is he has low speed and sword tech is slow, but he's an okay attacker. Pretty good candidate for the merit award if you want to give him equipment to make him faster. But he's not as good as the other heavy characters, and his magic is I think like lowest or second lowest or something, which is too bad. You can't turn him into a surprisingly good mage like Setzer or Gao. But okay, now if we're talking about Final Fantasy 4 and 6, and I'm tapping back into my my hyper research into those games in the early 2000s, then we're really done with the podcast. Listeners, thanks so much for hearing us jaw about Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest jobs. I think we will do a sequel episode to talk about more job systems, because there are definitely more video games and with cool job systems than just those two series. But that'll have to be for another day, because we are done for now. Next week we have our part 2 of our Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals set of podcasts. That first episode was great, and I'm sure Leona, Zach, and Kat will be fully enthused to talk about the end game of that game. And coming in April, we are having 2 episodes on East the Oath and Felghana, which is an awesome action RPG from the mid-2000s. I'm looking forward to replaying that, but I haven't started it yet. And Peter, I think you're going to be involved in a Kingdom Hearts 3 spoiler cast episode in early April, but we haven't recorded that one yet either. Is you looking forward to that?
Looking forward to it very much. I've got a lot to say about this one, and I know the other parties involved do as well, so it's going to be fun.
Awesome, and that's all that we have planned so far for the podcast. Listeners, if you want to reach us, the best way to do so is via email retro@rpgfan.com. RPG Fan also has message boards, a Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, Discord, Twitch. You can find links to all of those things on the front page of RPG Fan, and we have things streaming on Twitch every single day. And RPG Fan is also home to 2 other fine podcasts, Random Encounter and Rhythm Encounter. Greg, you are the host of the former.
Hello.
And the latter is on a hiatus, but that hiatus may yet end in 2019. We shall see.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers crossed. We shall see. Nothing to say yet. But listeners, you can also review us on iTunes or Google Play or whatever podcast venue you're using to listen to us. We love all the feedback that we can possibly receive. But before we turn off the recorder, let's share to listeners how they can reach us. Starting with you, Peter.
If you want to find me, you can reach me at I Have Fury on Twitter. Also, you can reach out to me, Peter T at rpgfan.com.
Cool. And Greg.
I'm at Greg Delmage on Twitter and pretty much everything, and G Delmy on the Discord.
And Audra.
Oh, I'm Audra B at rpgfan.com. And I have no Twitter.
You know, that is probably a wise decision, having no Twitter. Just saying. I'm worried that Twitter has turned me into a monster, so I maybe don't be on Twitter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, save yourself. There's still time.
Yeah. Several RPG Fan staff members are not on Twitter, and I am jealous of them, frankly. But personally, if you want, listeners, if you want to reach out to me, I am at The Real Monsoon and at Evoker for Dogs on Twitter. I am also Monsoon on RPG Fans forums, Monsoon Mike on the RPG Fan Discord, and Sollosi at rpgfan.com is the way to email me directly. But that's enough. I mean, again, I think maybe I mentioned this earlier in the episode. I hate job hunting. It's much more comfortable having a job and going there every day than searching for new jobs all the time. So I think today's search is over. Thank you, good night, and good luck.